Take the time you need, sweetheart. I'll be right here. It was with equal amounts of hope and shame that I left my mom's car and stepped towards the hospital. Mom didn't get out with me, but also didn't drive away, and she brought a book to read while waiting in the car park. I think she wanted to give me some space and such. It was a nice thing, but it still made me feel so alone, entering those huge old walls all by myself. Just reaching the reception desk to ask about Angie was a chore in itself. There was a group from the church nearby that had come over, and they were clogging the lobby. It was for one of those charity events where they gather the sick kids and put up some movie for them to watch. They did that sometimes when I was a patient myself, and it gave me conflicting feelings. Fond memories of old Reverend Joseph bringing giant bowls of biscuits and other things he'd baked himself, and Sister Bridget smacking the back of my head because I was eating too much or laughing too loud. "Lori!" A voice made me turn on my heels to spot a girl running toward me. She was taller now, and thinner, but I'd recognize those freckles and whitish hair anywhere. "Lori, that's you, right? It's me, over here." The receptionist was taking a while to find Angie's file, so having Angie herself appear was a relief. I think my mom called to tell I was coming beforehand. I don't remember what we talked of once we got past the initial greetings. It was awkward. Waves of anxiety and regret crashing in the back of my mind. But she just seemed so happy to see me. It was nice, and a double guilt trip, too. I wasn't sure how to ask her what I came for, either. One doesn't just go, "Hey, I've not seen you in years, but I just came to meet the devil," right? So the result was we just stood there for a while, laughing like the little girls we once were, at the same time catching up and talking of nothing at all. "This is a hospital. For what reason are you cackling in the middle of the hall?" I glanced over my shoulder to see who had spoken. A woman in a nun's garb who could be anywhere between 40 to 60 years old looked at me with a sour expression. Sister Bridget, for sure. She looked even more of a grumpy prune than when I'd last seen her. "Yes, you with the weird blue hair. Why do you even have that color on? What would your parents think?" I didn't respond. My hair was none of her business, and I'd actually been pretty proud of it. "I am talking to you, Miss Green?" the receptionist informed, then shrunk in her seat a little when I glared at her. "Come on, Lori, let's get out of here." Angie eye-rolled at Bridget, pulling me away from the lobby to go somewhere else to chat in peace like the cafeteria or her room. In some weird display of her lack of common sense, the old nun reacted to the teenagers ignoring her by raising her voice even more. "Miss Green, come back here this very moment! This is unacceptable! Miss Green!" With the way she was shouting, people were turning to look, and even some started following after us. It was like we stole something from her or similar. Looking at things from an outside perspective, Sister Bridget wasn't evil, but she was never a pleasant person either. We really didn't want to deal with her, so we switched from walking into outright running. Down the stairs, one floor, another, until there were no more floors to climb down. "Lori, I think we shouldn't... Look..." Angie gasped. Her voice was almost a whisper. "We shouldn't be here." I stopped and looked around. I couldn't recall being in this area before. This part of the hospital wasn't the old wing, but had very few people. I think I saw one doctor, just the tip of a white coat slipping out of sight at the end of the corridor, but that was it. It was so quiet, the air conditioning felt booming loud. "Where are we?" "It's the morgue," Angie frowned. "Remember when we were in my room, and if we looked through the window, we sometimes saw people bringing in gurneys? They came here." Of course I remembered. It was different from someone being brought to the ER. The ambulance lights were never on. No paramedics rushing with orders, no IVs and tubes, no rush. Just gurneys, body bags, and quiet. I also wasn't super fond of the idea of being around a bunch of dead people. The issue was, besides the air conditioning, I could still hear the sound of Bridget's posse looking for us, calling us over. Without thinking, I pulled Angie with me through the closest set of doors. The voices of the church group sounded muffled through it, first closer and closer, then fading as they went farther down the hall. Angie stiffened, and I let go of her wrist, thinking I might be gripping her too hard, before I realized what she was actually looking at. The back wall was filled with built-in metal drawers, and I had to shove away the mental image of corpses contained there. In the surroundings, there were shelves with tools and chemicals, a trash bin, and a couple electronic devices. But the stars at the center of the room were the two bodies lying atop metal tables. Light hovered above them. "We're trespassing. Here's not like the old wing, okay? They'll catch us. Come on," Angie whispered. It was so beautiful. Warm, golden light, like suns in miniature. One wavered for an instant, then darted upwards and through the ceiling like a reverse shooting star. I wondered what it was, where it went, if the other one was going to vanish too. But it just floated there. I stared, mesmerized by the gold orb. I was about to step closer when a shadow shifted in my peripherals. Something, moving. My eyes caught a wispy ash-gray cloak and armor that may once have been beautiful, but was now rusty and half-molten against flesh, up to the masked face of a 3-meter-tall monstrosity. Its feet dragged toward the light, breathing quiet, yet eerily, giving it the appearance of a tortured doll. It reached toward the light and smiled, a too-sharp grin with too many teeth. And then I saw the body on the table move, face twisting in terror and pain. "Help," he mouthed, a shaky, pleading hand twitching in my direction. The creature turned towards me as well, extending a hand that looked deader and grayer than the body's own. I thought fight or flight should kick in times like this, but it didn't for me. I just froze in place, frost burning my shoulder in the shape of its fingertips, my mind not quite following what was going on. Angie was pulling me away, or trying to. I couldn't move. Disinfectant and formalin were the strongest scents I could notice around, but there was something from it, like an unpleasant afternote that made my nose wrinkle. My gag reflex kicked in once my brain managed to sort what it was. Mildew and rot, smoke and iron, burnt flesh. "Lori!" Angie pulled me through the doors. I barely got past the threshold and heard it close when my legs gave in and I slid to the floor, shaking and puking in a full panic fit. "You okay?" Angie asked. Concern laced into her voice while she crouched down, sitting on her own ankles and placing a hand on my shoulder. But other than being worried for me, she didn't seem scared. Couldn't she see that thing? Couldn't she smell it? "Monster, Angie, didn't you see that?" "Ah," she blinked, then grinned, as if she just realized what I was talking about and got excited. "Yeah, that's an angel. Sometimes they pop up when there's someone dead or dying. It's pretty creepy. It's okay, though. They're dumb, too. Just ignore them, and they leave you alone." It burned me, Angie. It was so cold. It burned." "Well, yeah, but not anything worse." She averted her eyes, voice fading slightly. "I'm not crazy." I recalled the time we were smaller and walking through the old areas. The way Angie stopped at every corner, peeking out even if there was no one around. How she stepped so light it didn't make a sound. The antsy quip in her voice calling me to come quickly. They pop up when someone's dead or dying. Here's not like the old wing. It's not just close to a place where the dead stay. It's the place the dead stay. Don't look, don't linger, they'll catch us. She wasn't excited because I was scared, or because that thing hurt me. It was because the fact I could see them too meant she wasn't insane. When she was the one hurt or scared, I'd believe her. I'd not drug her to sleep when there were monsters hovering close like the nurses did. When I thought of that, I couldn't feel angry anymore. Once my legs stopped shaking, I stood up and walked as quietly as I could manage, letting Angie guide me like when we were younger. I finally told her about my dad and having a new wish. She led me 3 floors up, stopping in front of a dark, ebony doorway. The door itself was nothing like I remembered, but the metal number right above it was familiar. The same she'd been living in the last time I saw her. She said Lucy wasn't at Greenhaven, so if I wanted to see her, we should go pay her a visit. How did you even meet her to begin with? I misspelled Santa as Satan on a Christmas letter, she giggled. I don't think every kid that does that meets her, but I really wanted someone to talk to who'd believe me. Anyone would do. I don't remember the exact day Angie started babbling to me about meeting a magic princess back when we were little, but it was winter. Here we go. She pushed the door open. It didn't lead to the hospital bedroom I expected, but instead a long, dark hallway stretching for longer than it should, and another open doorway in the distance, the barest hint of a staircase visible behind it. She took out a torch from a pocket and turned it on, and I entered after her. Our steps echoed when we walked in. The stairs seemed to go on forever, down and down and down, until at some point I realized we were no longer descending, but going up instead. Did you ask for anything else after that? Yeah, a family. You know, better than the one I had. Angie didn't have the best parents. They weren't abusive or anything. They just weren't there. I don't think I've ever seen them. When she became ill, she was left under the care of the medical staff, out of sight, out of mind. And she didn't get better, so she only had me. Then, one day, Alex was suddenly around. A cross cousin, thrice removed, or something like that, transferred all the way from Latin America. Angie had been exploding with joy when she introduced us, and she stayed all bubbly for weeks, even though she never even mentioned having a cousin before that. It made sense now. We emerged at a huge, multi-floored indoor garden. A silver sky stretched above our heads beyond a tall greenhouse ceiling, rain pattering gently on the glass panes. In the morning glow, I took a while to notice the lights fluttering around us, the same wispy things I'd seen at the patio before. Some of them had faint human outlines, and the second that thought came to me, there were people all around us. Keepers and gardeners tending to the plants. They said Lucy's office was on the top floor. Great. More stairs, I heaved. Yep. Stairs all the way, Angie cackled at my plight. As many as we need to. Tamiel won't take more in, and you know what Vereen did last time they had to babysit. There's too many still. Just until more housing is built. Be nice. The door was ajar, but Angie knocked anyway. The chatter inside paused, and a "come in" resounded after a second. Grandmas would be pleased with that office. Plush couches, embroidered cushions, and little puff seats. A coffee table with doilies and a tea set with side servings of biscuits, toast, and jam. Thick carpet covered the floor, and lacy curtains adorned the windows. It looked like a tea room with Victorian furniture. Lucy was sitting across the table, stirring honey into her tea and talking to a man who was lying down on the same couch. Without the inherent strangeness of the night and the glow of wispy ghosts surrounding her, she seemed so normal now, almost human. Too bad I'd already seen too much to believe that. Angie rushed inside, and I almost expected her to dive into Lucy's lap like when we were kids, except there was already someone else on the couch occupying that spot. Good morning? Hello, Laurel, she smiled. It's been a while. Do you like sweets? I wondered how she'd recognized me. Clearly, I didn't need to introduce myself again, but did I need permission to sit down? Angie didn't. She plopped onto a puff seat and proceeded to gobble up biscuits, showing her middle finger to the man with his head on Lucy's lap. He returned the greeting by showing her the finger too. Aren't you way too big to act like a little kid? Welcome to my life. They're always like this, Lucy chuckled. What did you come for this time? I have another wish. Deal? Something to ask. Of course. But what is it you want exactly? It might be weird. Is there a wish she can make that'll make her happy forever? Angie piped in. I doubt it. She sighed, and I had the feeling she had replied us both. You all have similar wishes, starting with basic needs, water, food, shelter, but then most turn greedy. Fame, riches, beauty, to live forever, or someone's death. I tried to keep you all happy for ages, but have you played The Sims, and some sim always sets the house on fire? The game nailed it. I gave you whole cities, just take your pick. 99% are now in flames. Go figure. She gestured to the windows and the strange buildings beyond them. Nowadays, I only watch over my home and whoever I take a liking to. But some of you still reach out to me on your own, so when it happens, I try to at least listen. There are batshit psychos, but there are candid requests too, like you or Alex. What about him? Angie cut her off, pointing at the guy sprawled onto her lap. He lifted his head just enough to glare at us, with all the seething scorn of a cat who's been mildly bothered, before turning around to nap. He asked for me. For you to do what? Me. Whole. The corner of her lips rose in a wry smile. What can I say? I appreciated the spunk. A heart for a heart? Something like that. Can you stop talking like I'm not here? The Catman grumbled and got the finger from Angie again. I was speechless, torn between that day's earlier events, the grief of my father's loss, and the implication someone had wished to shag the devil. Strange things happen on this god-forsaken earth. I'd probably have just kept sitting there for a lot longer if more people didn't barge upstairs, making a ruckus all the way in. What in the Lord's name is this place? Begone, begone, begone! Good hell is wrong with you, hag? My mind registered the clerical attires even before I realized this was Sister Bridget, Father Joseph, and a younger nun with blonde hair that I didn't know the name of marching into the room. Bridget had one of those hardback Bibles with a cross on the cover, and I'd not be surprised if she'd been smacking people with it, which also explained the choir of swearing and curses still going outside. Stop. This is my home and you were not invited. The room exploded in colors and ice, lights in violet and blue and green and 1,000 hues that didn't even have names. Bright. So bright. spikes forming on the ceiling, frost on the windows. Air left my mouth with a single white puff. Cold, cold, hot. My eyes burned. Something wet dripped from them, from my ears and mouth and nose. I smelled iron. Breathing hurt. "Dove, your guests are still here." The man's voice sounded from behind me. I blinked rapidly, just enough to see the shape of a person walking toward Lucy. Then the chill and the lights faded, and she rushed back to where I was. My sight was all wonky in this newly found bleeding haze, too up close and catching so many little details it was painful to focus, while things far away were little more than blobs. "Sorry, I forgot. Oh dear, you're so fragile." I felt a handkerchief tapping my face. "Most of those here have some tolerance already. Oh, I'm so sorry. Is it hurting?" Blink, blink, blink. Past the red in the corners of my sight was a flare of wings. For just a second, then gone from view along the unnatural chill. Something akin to frosted glass making layers upon layers of sharp feathers. The top so white they almost glowed. The bottom was black, or coated in black. That same deep tar I've seen angels bleed, part dried and part dripping and disappearing on the carpet. Drip, drip. That must hurt too. She paused for a second and let out a hollow chuckle, bringing me back to sit by the couch with my friend. Angie had a nosebleed she was stanching with her own sleeve, but otherwise she seemed fine, at least compared to me. The sudden brightness and ice were gone, and the room's lazy daylight tried to warm my frostbitten cheeks. Second what she told me later, though, the trespassing trio was much worse for wear and had as much blood leaking from all the orifices in their heads as I had, but with no one to wipe it off. Poor Father Joseph seemed to be in the middle of a panic attack, gripping his rosary and mouth opening and closing without making a sound. Bridget was gripping her Bible while mumbling something that sounded like 10 psalms fused into one, and the blonde nun had fallen on her knees and was now covering her face with both hands, whimpering. All 3 frozen on their spots. "Well then, it's been a while since I've last had to introduce myself." She cleared her throat. "Hello, it's nice to meet you. I'm Lucifer." "Satan!" the priest gasped. "If we're going to use nicknames, I prefer Lucy. Satan sounds rude when you say it, so are you hungry?" A few moments passed, and there was no response. Only Joseph and Bridget still standing with their respective crucifixes, like some sort of strange church show. Lucifer let out a long, deep sigh. Really, crosses. The way she strained that word made me uncomfortable. What in that poor boy's life made you think he liked crosses? Seriously. My lids kept closing shut. I felt cloth tapping my cheeks dry again and slightly cold lips pressing against my temple. The burning sensation lessened a little, and I risked cracking an eye open for longer than a blink. It took me a moment to understand Bridget had crept closer until she was already right behind and whacking the Bible on the side of Lucifer's skull. Judging by the fact she didn't even flinch, that was as good as nothing. Well, almost. The wreath of dried flowers she'd always wore came apart, pieces falling like sad confetti and exposing a pair of horns. Not on her forehead, but raising in a slight curve from behind her ears. My dad had a favorite teacup. The wing was broken, with the middle of the loop gone and the remaining tips jutting into jagged edges. Mom had been telling Dad to throw it away. It'd been forever, but he never did. That's what those horns reminded me of. Broken china with a sharp emptiness in between. That wreath was a gift, she said in the same calm tone of always, and it took me a second to realize she was now holding Sister Bridget by the neck and off the ground. I've tolerated when you stupid, tantrum-prone bleach drinkers screw yourselves over and blame me, but next time you raise a hand to me or mine, I'll hurt you. Was I clear? Sister Bridget flailed her legs in the air. Was I clear? She repeated, this time a little slower. Yeah, she started, then coughed, and Lucifer let go. Bridget fell on her bum, and on her bum she stayed, coughing more and scampering backwards. Good. Now, what do you want? Choose your words carefully. Don't get close. Get away from me. You have no claim over us. Be gone. Lucifer sighed, exasperation so thick one could almost drink it. Deal. Space shifted in my peripherals, behind the wet redness in my view. I'd let myself relax, but the strange movement made me snap an eye open again almost immediately, despite the disorienting disconnect it caused. It's like the room was cut in half. Through my open eye, I saw the wintry morning light still trickling through the windows, dainty curtains waving with the breeze. And the furniture I and Angie had been interacting with still stood around us. Couches and chairs and the little vintage coffee table. Then, through my closed eyelid, the office just ended. Beyond, it was night. I could see Sister Bridget and the blonde nun in the corridor that led to the old patio of Greenhaven. Tiled floors with a dust haze that covered everything like the shroud of a time long past, undisturbed except for our old footprints. The blonde finally stumbled back to her feet and ran toward the front part of the hospital as fast as she could, tearing cobwebs and out-of-service tape, leaving Bridget alone. Distant footsteps echoed down the opposite side of the hallway, with nothing to clear the night penumbra besides the newer wing's lighting coming through a door the other woman left open. What the? Bridget seemed about to spout some colorful word choices, but cut herself short. Instead, she took a couple deep breaths, massaged her forehead, and her hand came out bloody. She stood up slowly. Christ, I must have hit my head. That sounds about right, she mumbled, using the wall to steady herself. From the way she kept looking around, confused and dizzy, she couldn't really see us. She seemed smaller than I remember, no longer a straight and imposing figure as she faced the faint steps echoing down the hall. Miss Green, I can hear you. You are trespassing in an unauthorized area. Stop bumbling in the dark and come out already. Miss Green? Step, step, step. Reverend, is that you there? Reverend Joseph was safe, just traumatized, in my side of the room. The unnamed man had had half a mind to pull him back when Bridget tried to bonk Lucy in the head, and now the old priest sat on a puff seat, shaking like an iPhone set to vibrate and asking where his female colleagues went when Angie handed him food. So the steps weren't him. Bridget's scream cut off before ever leaving her throat, and there was something heavy slamming down. I saw hints of ashen cloaks, faces with too many eyes and mouths and too many teeth, before a dozen hands grasped from the dark, pulling her in. The sounds they made, my God, the sounds. I barely noticed someone trying to get my attention, ushering me toward the snacks. Don't watch, but I did. I watched the things atop the shape of Bridget, her voice barely a whimper when one straddled her form, hands going into her chest and reaching at something deeper than the rib cage. But I saw no blood. Golden light pooled out from the wound. I watched the glow be swallowed and the creature be bathed in a ring of gold, swirling throughout its crown like a hollowed sun, beautiful and filled with the divine essence whence it came from. for only a second. Then it wavered, and the light flickered and faded like a dying lamp, the gold turning to rust and tar and wisps of smoke. The angel wept, arms rising to clutch its tainted halo and crying in a voice that carried more sadness and pain than any human could comprehend. It cried and cried until another creature, another angel, pushed it off the old nun and took its place to also drink from the golden glow. That one also came alight and faded and wept, and the next one too, as the angels swarmed her like a flock of deranged crows. Holy crap, Law, we said don't watch! Angie shook me by the shoulders. I gasped, both my eyes now wide open. The office tea room flooded fully back into view, and the old patio vanished from my sight. Better now? Yeah, I guess. What were they doing? Trying to feel whole. Lucy frowned. We were more attuned to our father than your kind. When we fell, a part of us was torn away. She took a deep breath. Father had named me Lucifer, the light bringer. Even crippled, I still had my own light to fall back to, but most of my siblings didn't. So they want hers. Even if they hurt her? Souls are infinite. They can be torn, but not destroyed, so they don't see what they're doing is wrong. Why don't you just give them souls? Then they'd leave us alone. If it were that easy. She mused, pushing a teacup into my hands. Tweaking Father's rules is simple. Get consent from his creation. Give something, take something. Then it's fair. But I can't create new souls. So, our first deal, what did you take from me? Effort. She smiled softly. You went through all that trouble to meet an old, tired lady. For such a small wish, that was enough. So that's why the first wish is free. It isn't, not really, but as long as you're not too greedy, it'll feel that way. If she told the truth, and that nursery rhyme contained the rules for how these deals work, then the following wish I made would be fair, at least in theory. Now, she spoke after the half-eternity it took for me to finish my tea. What did you come to ask me? My dad died. Can you bring him back to life? She looked at me for the longest 2 seconds of my life before shaking her head. Why? My dad isn't new. You can't bring people back? I can, within limits. Then do it. I paused and amended. Please? He is already gone. I cannot find those that are gone unless the soul in question calls for me. She sighed, her fingers wiping my tears again. When a medic tries to resuscitate someone, they have a time frame to work with too. After that, not all the CPR and fancy equipment in the world can do anything. Do you understand? It's like my heart was crushed to a pulp and pooled at the bottom of my stomach. I just went through a conga line of trauma just to get to that room and asked the devil herself to bring my father back, and even she couldn't do it. To the rational part of me, it made sense. But for the most part, I just knew my dad was gone, and I felt so very helpless. I didn't know how Angie could live like that as long as she did. I sure couldn't. I clenched my eyes and wept, clutching the hem of Lucifer's sleeve, the lace wrinkling within my fists. She smelled like earth, greenery, and dew, the way a garden smells after rain, and I tasted something bitter mixed with the tears and snot running down my face, and I wished I was strong enough. It's been almost 10 years now. I've not seen Lucy ever since, but whether it was due to my second wish or not, Greenhaven kept a hold on me. I kept visiting Angie, more scared of leaving her alone again than I was scared of facing the angels. By the time I finished college, there were more people who could see those monstrosities as well, and they were hiring security personnel specialized in dealing with that. And that brings us back to the issue of having a horde of soulless, soul-eating angels roaming through the hospital. Their numbers have increased since last year, and their ranks are getting worse. Up to 2019, I'd be very unlucky to bump into more than a couple cherubs per week, and maybe one Grigori per month. Nowadays, crossing Greenhaven's corridors feels like being a death row inmate taking their last steps. There are at least a dozen low-rank angels roaming about at all times, and there was one in the patio group with Bridget that I could swear is either a choir or a fury. I can beat a Grigori, sure, but I'll be damned if I have to face a fury without backup. We're now hiding in the security room. I'm writing this down while checking the feed for when the angels leave the hallway, or at least clear it enough for us to make a dash for Angie's doorway. I'd prefer to be calling for help, but the radio isn't working. Maybe the cold earlier did a number on it, and Angie totaled my phone by smashing it on the Grigori's head. Also, Alex won't shut up about angels ruining his lasagna, and it's driving me insane. Dan, the 20 pounds I owed you are under the notebook. Eddie, sorry. I don't think I'll be home for dinner. I know it's our anniversary. I love you. I really wish I could go home. Everyone, I can't apologize to you enough, but there are more and more of these things roaming the corridors and more bodies filling up the morgue. I don't think I can make it back, and we're running out of time. So, I'm going to make my third wish. This is Edward, or Eddie, if you will. Laurel disappeared 3 weeks ago. The police are investigating, and they're considering a kidnapping since her car is still in her parking spot. Though that's difficult to imagine. Laurel was quiet, but she was as tall as a guy and stronger than most guys. I can't picture her being dragged off without putting up a fight. Another possibility is she had a mental breakdown and ran away. I'm afraid they might decide that's the case. I've transcribed all of Laurel's notes here. It doesn't really feel like she's gone, but maybe that's what denial feels like. Last day she was around, she greeted everyone as usual, then went to get some tea. And by the time my shift started, no one could get in touch with her. Even her things disappeared. The trinkets on her desk, her spare uniform. Everything gone except for Dan's 20 quid and the notebook we found in the security room. Just left on the chair like it was waiting for us. The police don't believe those notes. They think it's at best the work of an aspiring writer, or at worst, a register of hallucinations. But it's real. It's not the first time people here mention seeing something shifting through the halls, or meeting a girl with whitish hair asking them for something, and as soon as they turn a hallway or blink, she's disappeared. We just never had an account this detailed of her before. The authorities are getting stumped. Maybe that's why I resorted to posting it all here, in case someone has an idea what to do. If you've seen my fiancé or know anything that may be related, please enter in contact. Her full name is Laurel A. Green. I miss her so bloody much. My big Teddy Lori. I think we should start compiling a set of rules to follow to stay safe, like I've seen in other stories of strange places, but I don't even know what to start with. The lighting on 18 still flickers, but only if you're alone when you walk by. Sometimes the elevators show numbers to floors that shouldn't exist, and the stairs go on longer than they should. More rarely, strange lights appear in the corner of our eye, like dots in the distance, waiting to be followed. And there are shadows, too, sometimes. I pray nobody is stupid enough to follow those. And last, well, there's that nursery rhyme. It's been around for ages. Sometimes we find ourselves humming it at random. Sometimes I can swear I'm hearing Laurel singing it. Beware, beware, there are things in the dark. They freeze your skin, they burn your bones. But if your dreams are worth going that far, find the morning star. She'll grant you one. Tiptoe through where the angels are. Discard the gold of the empty throne. If secrets are scary, if the truth scars, here's a light on your way downstairs. 3 wishes to the light bringer. Price and prize come in pairs. 1 is free, 1 is fair. On the 3rd, you'll be hers.